community member. Nice to see it thrive.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna. How about you, Mary?
Mary Scrivener. I lived here for 40 years, and I own a home about a half a block south of the campus. I've been involved in all of the planning stages since before there was sessions and visioning, and there were some. And I have a relative, my father's cousin, who was an Army officer who was stationed on the base when it was a base for the Manhattan Project, and was a part of the secret base in the airport on Regal Road and at Regal Park and all the rest of that stuff. I also represent the Registry Neighborhood Association, which is directly south of the property. We are the stewards of the water, the Los Pinos Arroyo section that runs through part of the campus, or runs up to next to part of the campus. Somebody else is the steward on the other side, and goes down through the neighborhood onto the Arroyo Chinizo. And I'm also here for the League of Women Voters.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Mary. What about you, John?
My name is George Roybal. I've been in Santa Fe since 1955. I moved from Texas, graduated from college at Santa Fe. But also, when I graduated, I came to work for the city of Santa Fe as first as assistant city clerk, and then in '62 I became the city clerk treasurer until '69. In '69 I moved to public schools. Later on, I did come back in 1983, and I served again with the city as General Service Director for the City of Santa Fe. I left when there was a change of administration in '86. Also, I served in the Planning Commission for I don't know how many years, but this was in the '80s. So there's a lot of things that I can. I wasn't planning. I was asked if I attend this meeting, and they told me that it was going to be a planning, sort of a planning. They were trying to develop some idea of what to do with the College of Santa Fe property. I also served, since I was an alumni, I also served in the board of the College of Santa Fe, and was there when they terminated. We did a lot of things. We tried to do even more, but the thing just folded. I am part of the alumni who serves in the capacity of, as an alumni. We also were able to, since way back in the 50s, we were able to put a practice. We had bingo at the College of Santa Fe, and during that period of time, we were able to put funds for when this was terminated. We had over $1 million in the fund that was being safeguarded by some of us. And we still, we had it up until a few months ago. We gave it to St. Michael's College, over $1 million. So this is part of the things that I'm aware of. I am very much interested, because I was very much interested in the education, because that's where I graduated, and I was very pleased with the kind of education that I received from the brothers at the time. And even though it was mixed with laymen and what have you, but the kind of training and everything that I received from them. By the way, I also went to work for North Central New Mexico Economic Development District, and we were housed there at the College of Santa Fe. And we did, I feel that I did a lot of things for northern Mexico, which I will go into.
Thanks so much, George. Very interesting. Thanks for joining us today.
My name is Kim Shanahan. I've lived in Santa Fe for 36 years. I graduated from Michigan State in 1979 in the Magic Johnson era.
There's two.
I was a journalism major. I was a journalism major at the time. Could not make a living in journalism, so I became a home builder. And I've been a home builder in Santa Fe since 1986. I was the head of the Santa Fe Area Home Builders Association from 2008 to 2018. These days, I'm somewhat retired, and I write a column for the Santa Fe New Mexican called Building Santa Fe. I will also admit that when the RFP went out to create and find the manager of this process, I submitted an application and wrote a 5-page treatise on what I thought this campus should do. Daniel Hernandez was selected as that, not me. My application was clearly a long shot since the RFP was written, so that virtually nobody from Santa Fe could actually earn that role, because they expected to have people who had redevelopment of institutional properties as their background, and obviously this is the first time we've done this for Santa Fe, so it was unlikely that anybody from Santa Fe would have been selected. I've written about this process. I was very much engaged in the process that Matt Brown shepherded when he came in as the Economic Development Director. And I just have a real personal interest in how this may happen. I was also affiliated with 3 of the teams that submitted applications. I was not part of the KDC group, but I was very much part of Alan Affeld's group, and also the one that was organized by John Rizzo. So I care about this property a great deal. I certainly don't have the history that George does, or am not a neighbor like Mary is, but this is the jewel of the crown, and we've been wondering for almost now 10 years what the heck we're going to do with it, and I don't want to see another 10 years go by, at which point in time all the buildings will be derelict if we don't do something very soon.
My name is Vicki Gavin. At this point, I'm consulting with St. Elizabeth's Shelters and Supportive Housing Programs. I've been not involved, but I've been going to many listening sessions, the Vision sessions, the Chainbreaker sessions, representing Santa Fe Now, the National Organization for Women. I'm on the Santa Fe Women's Commission now, and although we don't have our assignments going, I know that housing and housing issues are going to be my main focus on the commission. I'm a technical editor and writer, and a lapsed water rights lawyer.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. This property was, at the time that the college closed down, the city took it over. They had the issue of bonds. I forget how many millions of dollars, okay? And there was a organization that started at the college where we out there, and they fizzled out down the road. Okay, I'm interested in finding out, is that those bonds paid, and now what? Because the city made it a point that they were going to pay a guarantee to sales taxes. So I don't know where that's at. If we still owe some of those bonds.
That's a great question. I don't have the answer to that question.
We do owe a great deal more or less.
We're almost at half, but I think not quite at half.
We're paying a couple million, I think 2.7 million.
2.2 or 2.7, something like that a
per
year. And we still have a ways to go, but we're close to owning half of the property, or the value of the property. And we have a ways to go on those bonds, but I don't think they have an intention of retiring them soon, because we still have all this development work to go. I don't think the bank would let us, or the lender would let us do that. We have to be probably close to 75% before we could start renegotiating on the bond, right? Isn't that what the bonding is?
I think so. I mean, we could pay it off.
Well, we could pay it off if money fell out of the sky, but if we still have an owe, as I understand it, if we still owe money and we're not close to being paid off, we still have that liability on sales tax.
Okay, the other question is, on this idea that have been presented, are you thinking of selling each one of the businesses, or are you going to lease it?
So that's something that needs to be determined, and I think that the primary goal of the rezoning is to facilitate the disposition of the property, meaning that it could be subdivided, portions of it could be sold, portions of it could be leased. There are sort of clearly some high amenity buildings that would make sense for the city to continue ownership of and be the leaseholder for whoever is using those buildings. But those buildings would function as public buildings. But all of that would need to be developed as a strategy that is integral to the plan. My understanding is that the city has not made any decisions yet. I think that they have sort of strong feelings about what should be kept in perpetuity. And that is sort of generally what we see by the sort of light green buildings here. But there also are these light blue buildings which clearly are useful in the short to medium term, but maybe in the longer term might actually become more of a development opportunity. So, but where sort of buildings are sitting on that list is also sort of flexible, because there could be long-term users who are a perfect fit with existing buildings, and that may change the city's decision on, well, I thought we were going to work to demolish this and make this property available in 10 years, but maybe we should keep it longer. So all of that is in many ways in flux and needs to be sort of flushed out in the next few months.
There are also some university buildings that are either leasing or have bought. The Santa Fe Community College is supposed to have some buildings there. Is that their buildings there, or is it leased?
No, their own property, isn't that right, Kim?
Yeah.
That's
The
own
higher
property.
education
Could you
center.
put those out?
Yeah.
It's
It's
this building right here and the parking lot right here and this
This is the
lot.
higher education center.
Yeah, except for like a little corner there.
Yeah.
And a little corner over here.
Yeah.
And
It's
that
kind
is
of,
owned.
it's kind of like this. This is the Schellenberger Tennis
This is
Center.
Schellenberger.
And
That's
that's
outside.
private.
This also is
This is
the,
private.
this
Right.
Santa Fe
Private
Art Institute. They have a
institute.
99-year lease
This
on
is a
that.
bank right here. It's
Oh, this
private.
is the bank?
That's
Yeah,
right outside the
that's
property line, yeah.
Mexico Bank and Trust, it's
Yeah.
right here.
Yeah.
And the access road is our access road.
That's correct.
right up here.
That's correct.
There's also, George, a couple of areas that are outside of the campus that could someday become in the campus
That's
proper, and that is the state of New Mexico land that has been negotiated to potentially have a land swap, and also U.S. Forest Service property that's right here that also could potentially have a land swap
Right.
that could all be brought into the campus proper.
And this is all state of New Mexico land up
Yeah.
here.
Public schools, Santa Fe
Public schools
schools.
on these two properties.
might-
This is the library. This is all state of New Mexico.
What is this right here?
Smiths
This is the
and,
shopping center.
yeah,
Smith's.
Smiths,
Oh, this is on
Petco.
outside.
Cerritos
Yeah,
Road,
this
yeah.
is Cerritos
Right.
Road. So
And
this
this is St.
orange
Michael's.
line is
Right.
inside. Yeah.
The
And
reason-
then
the
Nava
reason-
School is down there, State of New Mexico
Yeah.
on Siringo Road. Nava School is that one. And the city owns this group right here, right?
That's
That
correct,
goes
all the way
that
out to
way.
Serengo,
Yeah,
this is a
right.
big city property, so, no, so I think in terms of future opportunities for reorganizing this, increasing connectivity, creating sort of new gateways and sort of orientation to Franklin Miles Park, there's a lot of opportunity over here.
Yeah, this is the city park.
Right, and this can all be sort of fleshed out in this process as well. And I think that sort of another thing that, I don't want to sort of get ahead of ourselves here, but on that, because there's some basic questions we want to get back to, but, you know, one of the key issues is access to this property. And the fact that there are some entrances, but it's really limited in terms of how you can actually get to it from other places.
So far,
So,
because of
yeah.
our inability to make the deals with the U.S. Forest Service and the
Yeah.
state land, it has limited our ability to make connectivity.
So we have an opportunity to sort of try to actually plan for that.
Could we have introductions from these people?
Oh, yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. Please go ahead.
I'm Tanya Yuzu, a senior designer with Topicus Design here in Stefan.
Oh, you're with us?
Yeah.
Okay, and your role here is to just?
Yeah, I keep notes,
She's
No.
taking notes and listening.
Okay, I do.
I'm similar. My name's Kevin Perry. I'm a landscape architect, and I'm with Optical
You're the landscape architect?
Yeah,
but-
Okay.
But Kevin's focus, just for everybody to know, is actually on multimodal transportation and connectivity. So he's thinking about how the site can be better connected to the environs, and that's something that that is a big concern that we want to talk with all of you about. Kevin also knows a thing or two about green streets and sustainable infrastructure. And so we sort of want to sort of think about
I
that
can't see it.
as too.
That's the.
If, George, if it's okay, I want to sort of
No, I
get
can't read
back,
that.
see if I can sort of keep this on schedule and go back to sort of our leader questions. I really welcome this sort of informal conversation, so please feel free to interrupt me again later. But I wanted to sort of give everybody a chance to sort of chime in. It sounds like everybody knows this site pretty well. Everybody's been there. Everybody's had a chance to experience the campus. So that's a good thing. Given what you know about it and what this place has meant to you in the past and sort of how you interact with it now, just tell me some things that you sort of think that you really like about it, you think are very valuable, and tell me some things about how Midtown has actually impacted you in a positive way, whether it's places that you go to visit, access to programs, other things. Let's talk a little bit sort of about how this has actually positively impacted you. And we can just go
I
around.
will start that, but I don't have much.
I'm a newcomer.
We're not going to just let you do it forever.
For me, simply films and plays.
You have to speak up, please.
For me, the films and plays and cultural opportunities that I've enjoyed for so many years. I have no other connection except interest in the redevelopment, making sure that it serves Santa Fe's.
Thanks, Vicki. What about you, Ken? You clearly have a big stake in this.
Well, it's such an open-ended question that it's almost impossible to answer.
Yeah.
Just one anecdote, when I was studying for my contractor's license in 1990, I found the quietest place in town to be the library. I could go to the library and study for my contractor's test. I'm also a huge fan of Legarreta, who is the architect who designed the Santa Fe Art Institute.
Yeah.
I've hosted events at the Schellenberger Center and also the Fitness Center through the Home Builders Association. I mean, it's I could go on, but I'll stop.
Okay, that's great. What about you, George?
You know, I was also a general contractor. I had a license for this since 55, 56, somewhere there. Anyway, the thing that, you know, that the alumni, speaking more or less what I know about the alumni, we were very saddened that the College of Santa Fe had a day allowed or closed because they couldn't keep it up. And if there would be some kind, even a small portion of the area there, have something that would be or would allow people like us, me, in 1955 when I started College of Santa Fe, you know, the opportunity. There might be some teachers that would be, you know, less interested in kind of salaries, but provide at least some of it. See, at that time they had education. They brought about education and accounting or the business aspect. I got my degree in education, I mean in business, and I did quite well. So that's so that would be my primary interest, and I'm very interested in helping out kids, education, no matter what level or whatever you're doing. Right now, I'm looking at trying to help Santa Maria with they have also purchased borrowed quite a bit of money to have the school that they have. So I'm looking at helping them.
Thank you, George. What about you?
When I bought my home down the street on Rancho Stringo, the college was one of the main attractive features, both for the library, which was fabulous. Holston Library is a fabulous library, and I'm sorry it's being dismantled. Both for history research and just a great place to be around the students and have that kind of academic environment. I also am a big film goer and was one of the first founders of the Screen and the theater and everything, Santa Fe Art Institute. I've been a longtime supporter of them. And so for our neighborhood, which before the federal housing project was built where I live, our neighborhood was built in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. It's a historic ranch. And so there are acre-plus properties on there of people who then went to College of Santa Fe as students, fell in love and married, all of them, and then there's a big, rich history in our neighborhood of people who are affiliated with that. The kids all went to Santa Fe High, then they went to the College of Santa Fe, and you know, it's the whole neighborhood all along what is now Siringo Road has a long history of homes and families, ranches, small ranches. The Emermans was the big ranch that made the Santa Fe High School property that are affiliated with. Before anything, it was all part of Agua Fria Village. It was all farmland and ranch land and sheep grazing for them, because the drainage this way goes towards the river. From about the middle of the property, it goes south towards the other direction, and so there were real opportunities here for them to have productive lifestyle here. And then the Army took it over in the late 40s and turned it into the depot for the Manhattan Project. There was a big rail spur that came from and went in. There was the secret airport. There was a lot of stuff that went on. The Brunn Hospital was here for the radiation burns and all that stuff. It was all located right here. And before this was part of, it was all county land and completely undeveloped from the photographs that I have from the 50s and 60s. And but I mostly used it initially when I moved here and moved into the neighborhood in the 90s as a cultural reservoir and a buffer between this very, very much built out area, because all of Zia Road was undeveloped, all of Rodeo Road was undeveloped, all of that was all farmland. And our stretch of, I call it our stretch of development along Siringo Road was the first big annexation with the county, including the high school, Nova School, the middle school here, to make Santa Fe push out to the south. And so there's a lot of history there.
I'm curious, just your connection, how would you typically get on campus? Would you walk? You would walk?
Absolutely.
What was that like? I'm sure back in the day
It's,
it
was
very
wonderful.
easy.
Yeah, it was my evening stroll.
Yeah, yeah.
I would walk up to the Greer Garson to see the shows. I would walk up to the Screen to see the movies. I would walk to Fogelson in the afternoon to spend the afternoon and evening in the library reading history books. I mean, that was how I learned about Santa Fe history.
Yeah, yeah.
It's too hard to get downtown to go to the library downtown.
I'm curious if you think your neighborhood would be interested and excited in sort of continuing to have that access and just being able to sort of
Absolutely.
walk onto the campus.
That was one of the most important things, was that we are torn because our main road, Rancho Siringo, is a cut-through road, and we want to preserve that as a neighborhood road, and we'd like to put the bikeway on there and fix the sidewalks and make sure they work, but keep it as a pedestrian access so that we can prevent the cut-through driving. Because when this construction starts, we know that there's going to be 2,000% increase on cars on our road, because they're going to avoid that intersection right there in front of you, right there, that one, because it doesn't have right turn lanes. And you know, I begged the city years ago you heard me. Put in a right turn lane there now before, so people get used to it, because that's going to be really, really critical. The high school driving patterns are pitiful. That is a terrible, dangerous intersection. Same thing for Nava. School needs a lot more protection there. They need a lot more protection. They did really well with the driving recirculation when they redesigned the library. So that's all set up pretty good
drop
for it.
off that comes in here.
Yeah, they
Mary,
really
will you-
improved that.
Mary, will your neighborhood fight to preserve Nava as an elementary school?
Yes, absolutely.
So you may not know, but it's been on the school's chopping block.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
School
it has.
programs. And,
Yeah.
and if we think about multifamily being part of this plan, then closing it would
Absolutely,
be
Nava is
ridiculous.
critical, and that then it tends to concentrate families in this area,
That's right.
because they know they have a primary school, a secondary school, and a high school that they can walk to.
Yes.
So at this stage, sort of connections to this become very
Absolutely,
important. And if there's folks that are living over here.
yeah,
we-
yeah.
If you imagine a couple thousand multifamily units, which originally there was thought that it could.
That would keep
hold,
that school
it would keep that
open.
school open for sure.
Absolutely.
Sorry, please go ahead.
My name is Sage. I'm here
Hi,
to
Sage.
interpret, but I'm also a resident nearby.
Oh,
I
great.
can't hear you at all.
My name is Sage, and I live off of St. Michael's.
Oh, okay.
And I wanted to also answer your
Yeah,
question.
no, please do.
I'm currently using the space to attend the community art closet every third Saturday by Vital Spaces with Sean Ahmad.
And where is that held?
So as you enter through St. Michael's and you make a left, and it's the immediate right. There's a parking lot and then a building and a courtyard.
Oh, they're held at the Art Institute, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
I would
right.
say.
So you come in here and go over to the
Okay,
Santa Fe
got
Art
it.
Institute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really awesome because I can bring my neighbors. It's a predominantly low-income neighborhood,
Uh-huh.
subsidized by the city's housing authority. And just like the apartment complex where I live, there's like a dozen others in town, but like 3 or 4 specifically in that area. And we're all concerned about gentrification. If the prices were to,
Right.
if you sold it to a big, I don't know, a capitalist, and they
Yeah.
made something
Yeah.
that would drive the prices up, it would affect us
In
all.
your neighborhood, yeah, that would affect everybody.
Yeah, and we want,
Yeah.
I just wanted to contribute by mentioning there's hundreds of elderly people, underprivileged elderly, and hundreds of students all around that neighborhood, and workers, families, and we would like the space to be made into something that we could have access to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super helpful.
Would you like to join us, Sage?
I'm sorry, can you tell me your name again?
Sage.
Sage. Thank you so much, Sage. And thanks for joining us.
So
So,
you live in Hopewell neighborhood?
Yes.
Yeah,
Hopewell
great.
and Second.
And Second, okay.
So, Mary, you talked a little bit about, you started to touch on some issues around access and connectivity.
Yeah.
And Sage, you're actually touching on some issues about displacement and sort of the potential negative impact on the
Oh,
neighborhood.
right. We're going to
But
have
as
the
well
same
as
thing for
access.
our
So-
Well,
neighborhood.
it's
So-
also the potential positive impact.
Right,
Because
that's really
now
good,
we know
yeah.
they don't
So-
have access, and if something was
Right.
to be created.
I want to sort
Right,
of.
there's no crossing.
Yeah.
And in order to really get into the campus, you have to go from St. Mike's down Yano to Alumni Drive, and
Right.
drive in the
Oh,
south
wow.
way, because there's no pedestrian access
So I'd
here.
like,
And
I'd
it's
like
really
to talk
dangerous.
a little
yeah.
bit more about this connectivity issue and sort of the challenges that all of you sort of experience with getting to the campus, but also just thinking to the district, but also thinking about how those things might be overcome. And then I would actually love to talk a little bit about these other issues about sort of how it might be impacting the neighborhood in a positive or a negative way. But I'd like to sort of hear from somebody who hasn't spoken much.
Go ahead, Kim.
Kim,
Well,
maybe
one
you
of
can
the
start.
key connectivity things, this is where people would shop.
That's right.
And there was a split
Right in
between
here,
here.
right?
And there's been a tentative conversation with the property owners of the Smiths who have said, no, we're not really interested in opening it up. And they
Yeah.
took that no for an answer, and they
Yeah.
just let it go. But clearly, being able to walk through there to Smith's and all the other things that are there is critical to the connectivity, as you well know. Obviously, the connectivity of access to the park and the school will mean that you need to have some means to be able to get through the U.S. Forest Service property. The former superintendent of the U.S. Forest Service actually told me that they would be willing to even give it to the city. And there was also a negotiated deal that Matt O'Reilly had created with the state to actually have all of the state property come in and trade with some property the state desires down by the state police headquarters.
So that hasn't happened.
No.
And that could really, you know, the back
You were
of
promised that years ago.
I know. The deal was done during the Martinez administration, or prior to the Martinez administration, and the Martinez administration let it die for 8 years. So it literally has been a deal that has been negotiated for.
Meanwhile, they're still using your property for $1 a year, or are they paying?
I'm not sure. But the point to the connectivity, if you don't recognize the outside of the box, so to speak,
Right.
it really becomes a pointless exercise from your perspective, I'm sure.
Right.
Well, some of the things that came
Well,
up-
the other thing is that
Yeah, go
Alumni
ahead, Mary.
Drive is not acceptable. No, way down.
Way down
Yeah,
here. Yeah,
that is,
coming in
that
this
is
way.
gonna need major improvement if it's gonna be the major southern access point. And-
The whole relationship with schools and their security and not being able to walk from multifamily to this
Is,
is crazy.
it's
Right.
crazy, yeah, it's gotta be.
You can't.
It's
You gotta be able to walk to the
Yeah,
high
better
school, you gotta be
direct,
able to walk
right.
to the elementary school, you gotta be able to walk to the middle school,
Right.
you gotta walk to the library.
The students at the campus, I'm not indicting you, but they used to have, before Santa Fe Institute was built, there was this block wall going along behind here. They had a Kiva ladder that they would crawl over in order to get to the shopping center. On each side, they just would climb up this.
Well, the
little
one thing
Kiva
about
ladder.
access there, I years ago, I went to some events at the Art Institute because my niece worked there and she'd drive me around. But other than that, I didn't have much to do with it. Until recently, just driving through there and feeling the space and just thinking about, well, what could this be? And the potential that it could have. And not knowing the history, but wanting to know it, and
Right.
wanting to honor it. But I also just, going in there, it's just such an oasis,
It is.
right? And you come off of, so when we think about connectivity, which is great, but also to think about how to keep it.
So the perimeter road
To not make,
was,
they may not make big traffic streets, right? 'Cause
Right,
Yeah.
right, so that it's, there's
You
that
need to
sort of
increase the
sense of
connectivity, but
oasis.
but not make it a through
not,
street.
not expect that you're
Right.
making places like this.
There's gonna be a light in the middle of the plaza. The whole idea of the perimeter road, I thought, works and still works.
This sort of ring road when you say
Right,
perimeter, is that what you mean, Mary?
because these state office buildings, this is the state library and archives.
Right.
And access to that is, I think, real critical. And there is supposed to be an easement through here,
That's correct.
to this state street right here. which is-
That's correct.
yeah.
You know,
That's
and the
supposed to be-
perimeter road, once these properties do come in, it's no longer the perimeter road. It actually
It's
is
an
a-
access road.
It's a road that actually
Right,
could potentially,
Right.
you know,
Right.
my personal
Not just the
thought has always
Coyote
been,
Trail.
Yeah.
if you ever were gonna consider where the multifamily would go, and the plans that came forward in 2018 were all over the place.
Mhm.
And none of them looked at the state land or the U.S. Forest Service land, because it wasn't part of our purview to look
Right,
at it.
that's
But the
correct.
reality is that if you're gonna put multifamily anywhere, it really should probably go right here, next to the parks, next to the elementary school, and also in the center, which has the least impact on her neighborhood, on Mary's neighborhood, because you can go 5 stories for
Right.
the overlay district. And rather than have them fronting on these 5-story buildings on these
Right.
main roads, you put them in the center.
Right, right.
So they have the least
So-
kind of
so
impact on
this-
the neighborhoods.
The extension of this through what is an alley now, behind these shops right here, is,
So I'm glad you brought that up.
is a good method,
There's
because
another,
that is,
there's another
that would be.
opportunity for a
right,
connection here,
and a
right?
connection right through there.
Yeah.
That would be a major connection, and it would be far enough away from this one
Mhm.
that the traffic would flow correctly, and it wouldn't just, there's already a big light right here. and it would not disturb negatively to those state office buildings, this little campus that they've developed right in here.
But connecting to what?
To Cerritos Road.
No, but I mean, why?
Oh,
what-
well,
what
here's
are people
the
coming to?
deal. This is a bus route. There's 2 buses on Cerritos Road, and I think there's several stops along just this stretch that's pictured here. And on Cerritos Road, it's bus route 4, and there currently is 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 pictured there, that are 4 stops that are already on there, and that's the bus I take, and our whole neighborhood goes through that bus stop right there. So, and it also connects to Nava School, Santa Fe High School, and it's walking distance from Cerritos to the Lafarge Library, and there are students who do take that bus and go to Milagro this
So you're
year.
thinking about access to transit there?
Yeah,
something
right, that's the transit, but there's
right.
no transit that cuts through.
Yeah, yeah.
So one of the things in the visioning that we talked about was a shuttle service between routes 4 and routes
To get you
2
from one to
to pass people through so that they could get from one station to another. There is a bus that goes on St. Michael's, I
That's
think
right.
it's 5, I think it's 5, but there's a stop right here.
And that gets you to the hospital.
Yeah, it's the hospital route. But there's no time connections to 4 or 2, or 1 and 2. I mean, they're all off. So you have to wait half an hour for a connection. So that improvement is really important. And I've talked to the bus authority people about that, and they said they're aware of it. They're looking at the timings on it. So that's something that we've talked about for a long time, is improving that connection up and down.
Are there ways that the connectivity to St. Mike's can be enhanced? Are there things that you think are?
Well,
good
Llano
opportunities?
Street is going to need some improvements over there, that one, yeah. Because it doesn't have a wide enough turn lane through the whole, well, now, wait a minute, maybe, yeah, they put the turn lane in,
It's pretty narrow.
but the turn lane's okay, but the bike path is not. And that is designated right now as the connection between the Arroyo Chamizo Trail and other trails. And that's weak, I think, because there's going to be more traffic on that. And we would much prefer to make the designated bike trail Retro Cerritos Road,
Yeah.
so that it goes through the middle of the campus,
So
or
getting an
Yucca, or
alternative
something
route
like
can
that,
come this way or
to
this
divert
way.
the bike traffic off of the heavy traffic
Go ahead,
This-
Ken.
Well, Forrest Thomas owns this property here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the ability to have an easement that goes, if you're not gonna open up through the school.
Mhm.
Once you get into this parking lot, you can walk along the front of these buildings, you can get over here, so that is not necessarily a dangerous
Right.
pathway
Right.
there.
He owns this property here too. That
Yeah,
one.
that's right.
Yeah, that's out at the north edge of Milagro, and it's undeveloped.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
I have another appointment at 11, so I'm gonna have to leave right now.
Okay,
And
okay.
I'd like,
It's only 10, George.
I have.
Well, you gotta go to-
11 o'clock.
You gotta,
He has
it's
to
only 10
commute
o'clock.
to his next, right?
Little hand on the pen.
Did you forget to change your clock or?
I never know what time it is, so I totally understand.
So I have a question while George is looking. Has the Opticus people spoken with Jamie Blosser?
Yes.
Okay, so she may not participate in these community
Yes.
events, but obviously she is the executive director of the Santa Fe Art Institute.
Oh,
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
she's also an architect and a planner.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
And she has
and they're very
strong
heavy
opinions,
involved
very
in
strong
this.
opinions about
They
this.
hosted a bunch of public meetings
Yeah.
over at their place,
Yeah,
and they are
It's
wonderful,
really helpful.
really engaged,
There's
yeah.
one of those things, this is a little bit of a tangent, but when I was getting back to sort of this thought about like, how do you use the buildings?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've got the Art Institute buildings here, right behind there are some old barracks. And there's a question there, is maybe that actually would be a great addition to the Art Institute program that they have, and maybe that's actually some low-hanging fruit for doing some renovations into studio spaces or sort of
You
other
know,
art-related.
they talked about that.
Well, so there you go, Kim, is that this, or maybe they should go now, and that's sort of, those are the kinds of things that they really need to be thinking about.
Yeah, they have had before the pandemic, they had a project going on with those barracks for remembrance of the Manhattan Project. They had the Tularosa Downwinders up here for a big event and movie and everything that they made there. So they're using them as part of the historic aspect of for the Manhattan Project part of the history of the campus right now. They're pretty derelict, and they may also not be so
They're not worth it.
Safe.
not so good.
Save the
So-
Douglason Library before you say it.
Yeah, absolutely, don't save those.
Yeah.
But there are other parts of there are other ways to remember the Manhattan Project that would be a lot more appropriate than just those. There were more barracks right there, but they burned down.
Yeah, those are
I mean, the whole thing
metal
was covered with warehouses and
Metal
lead
railings
barracks
breaking away.
and everything. It was very questionable stuff was kept there.
We have about 5 more minutes. There's a couple of directions that we could take this. One, I think you sort of were talking a little bit sort of about memory, and that can get us into sort of talking about arts and culture, how we might want to sort of think about public space or
Yeah.
open space
I
here.
have, my neighbors
Why
have
don't we sort of
very
touch on that a little bit?
firm feelings about that.
Okay, great.
In the center of this campus here is this little plaza area here. And many classes,
You
you
think
know
like this
this
one
stuff, yeah. Many classes put some of these big ponderosa trees in here. This was their public, their gathering space. And so that's one thing that they like to retain and not tear down those trees. Some of them are now 70 years old, and they're beautiful
There's
trees.
some big
They're
trees
very
out there.
healthy.
Yeah.
They could use more water, and they could use a lot better maintenance around them. I have done a preliminary tree inventory for the Municipal Tree Board on this area of only the historic trees and the good trees we're keeping, not the elms. I did not count elms. So we have that. And there are also some trees, let's see, right along this stretch right here that are very old, and they were donated by somebody, by a class as well. And so they're considered to, they're on the list, but they're not very healthy is the problem. They're not maintained. And so that's a problem with a lot of trees. Much of the rest of this, especially around, I think all of this, do you know the date of this photograph? 2 years ago.
Yeah, but you
Because
can-
this is all torn up, so
this
that's
stuff
2
is all
years
gone
ago.
too in here,
Yeah.
right? This is all gone now.
Yeah. So a lot of these have been torn out, and these were all elms and scrub trees, junipers and cedars, and they're all taken out.
So Mary, this is a high priority space for you.
That's a
This
space
sort
that
of
they,
yeah.
that my neighbors who went to school there said, hey, we washed a lot of cars to put that tree in there. And so
Anybody else have any thoughts about that? About special places?
Well, the other thing about it is that there are not nearly enough trees on
I was just
here.
gonna say,
Yeah.
And there
that's-
could be, we've
Something
got this
missing.
new tree, something or another program here in Santa Fe that just started up.
Yeah.
And, if we're looking for places that want trees, this is the place because
Yeah.
it's got great drainage.
Yeah.
I can testify about how many times our neighborhood floods. It's got great drainage over there, and we should really be harvesting all that water.
Trees can hold a lot of water.
And because of the roof numbers and the hardscape,
That's
there
super,
is drainage.
No, I
yeah.
appreciate that. Does anybody else want to add anything about cultural spaces, public spaces?
I wouldn't say more trees.
Yeah.
Like 200 times more.
Vicki, please go ahead.
I'm just, as a water rights attorney, I can tell you, we don't have water. And I'm really concerned about planting more trees or any kind of water.
So every drop that hits a roof should be harvested.
That's
Absolutely.
true
Every
too.
drop that hits a roof should be
Absolutely.
harvested.
Right.
Not necessarily just for landscaping, but actually to offset possible water that we need.
Right, it would be gray water. There's a huge drainage that goes down here. It's all of the Shellbarger Roof.
Yeah, there's a big
That
square,
goes,
yeah.
there's a hand
It comes down
dug
this way.
that way.
Mhm.
This whole area here is steep, all along here.
Yeah, it's a very deep.
And along the Arroyo Los Pinos, that would be a great place to put a park green space.
Yeah.
Because water does flow there, no matter how small the rain is.
Yeah.
We do get water through there.
Yeah. You know, we have just about a minute. If we could sort of go around the room. I'm about to ask you a really tough question. Well, maybe not so tough. If there is a place that you visited or another place that comes to mind where you said, I wish Midtown was like that. Another thing that you've experienced, another place that you've experienced in the world, in Santa Fe, in New Mexico, somewhere else where you would say, I wish Midtown was like that. Does something come to mind for you? We can start over here and go this way. Just do it. Okay.
So what comes to mind for me is Grand River Avenue in East Lansing, Michigan, where the road...
I know Grand River Avenue.
So beautiful campus on one side and all the services you need on the other side of the road, and you cross at your own peril.
We could put that up. Oh.
We're always taught that you should always root for the Michigan team.
No, you should not.
Unless they're playing Notre Dame. Anyway, anybody else?
George,
George, go ahead.
I'm sure.
You know, I love trees, and I would love to have them everywhere, you know.
Yeah.
Both evergreens and, you know,
Yeah.
other trees. The problem is that the city is pretty watchful in the amount of water that you use.
Right.
So if we can't find trees that are going to be, you know, limited in the amount of water that they need to be able to grow, it's no use in planting trees that are not going to be watered. That's what
The best way to do it, they need to be integrated into your
I
understanding.
need to convince Mary to fall in love with elm trees.
Well,
I think Sage has a...
Yeah, go ahead, Sage.
There's this cultural park in Caracas, Venezuela,
Oh, wow.
called
Okay.
Tuna El Fuerte, Cultural Park Tuna El Fuerte. They actually received a prize by UNESCO. And what it is a public space for the youth and everyone to explore their talents. So there's a dance studio there, there's a photographer, there's a dark room, and it's all public. So everybody has access to a computer lab for poets and library. And I just wanted to mention it because Santa Fe might need the teenagers, you know, on behalf of the youth, they always complain there isn't anything to do. So if you build infrastructures that support their underground social movements, it will help prevention, you know, they won't get in trouble.
That's super helpful.
And I think it's really important for Santa Fe to have spaces where we could gather in community.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed attending concerts there and art shows. And also it can be funded through federal grants that you can ask for with the SAMS number, the city or whatever SAMS and DUNS number. You could fund, there's so many grants around the arts that could fund public space.
Yeah, and that's another another opportunity here with putting a plan together is if there are public improvement projects, we can match those with future funding sources. And that's something that's simultaneous. Go ahead, Mary.
I grew up in Chicago, so for me it's Grant Park in Chicago. But it's suffered in the last 25, 30 years from a lot of incursions. So there's an example of ways that it gets hemmed in and hemmed in. Used to be a beautiful, great park with the museums, the city right next to it, transportation available right through there, and then the lake. And so that was a huge, big thing for it. But this, I don't think that we can afford to make a large public open space. But we could certainly do a lot to enhance what the intention of the campus was.
We have a beautiful open space.
And we have the open space right
Being
there.
able to orient to that would be
So I need to just, I have to disclose that I intend to write about this in a column that I'm going to publish on Sunday.
Okay.
And honestly, I'm going to say, I sympathize with you at Opticos.
Yeah.
And I will kind of end it with, good luck. Because I don't see how you in the world you're going to be able to coalesce what you're going to receive in the next couple of days and actually produce something that has meaning. So good luck. I applaud your intent. I'm a little sanguine about the ability to actually happen. So I just want to disclose that.
No, I appreciate that, Kim. And there there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So,
I suggest you allocate a small space to be ran by the youth and for the youth.
Yeah, bring in chambers.
Educational purposes, but also to
Yeah.
promote social
and the other thing, I do want to mention that there is a very robust public outreach track that's being managed by DPAC from the University of New Mexico and the Midtown Engagement Partners.
Underway now, we're going to be.
That's underway now.
That none of us have heard of.
So that's actually,
robust can it be?
so that's actually very important that everybody understands.
What's the
that
name
that's
of that
happening.
again?
So it's the DPAC, which is through the University of New Mexico, and they are working, and that's Michael Pride, who may be out in the hallway, and Holly.
So when you say robust stuff, you would think that people would know about it.
Well,
especially people like us who have been engaged. with
sure,
this.
and Kim, I'm trying to explain something to you that is out of my purview, and it's out of my scope of work, so I'm doing my best to explain to you what else is going on. But there is a parallel track of community engagement that has been happening and will continue to happen, and so that this is the avenue that we have today. My goal is to synthesize this to direct the physical planning decisions that we do in the application. Because we need to actually be able to say, we need to be able to articulate, where are new streets going to be? What are those new streets going to be like? What is the zoning going to be like? How is the land use going to be organized? Where are the public spaces? We need to be able to articulate all those physical plan issues. So what we're looking for personally here is input that can help direct.
So what's the name of this outfit, this program? I didn't hear you, what you said.
So I encourage you to go to the Midtown District Santa Fe website, and that will actually, that's the city's website, and that actually will explain to you. There's a really good frequently asked questions there that talks about that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really bad frequently asked questions because it doesn't address the majority of questions that were brought up at the listening sessions. I wrote all of them down.
So Mary, I
and
appreciate
they're
that.
less than half of them there.
And so it's important to actually communicate.
So
that.
you're relying on that guidance and the guidelines that came out of that for your
No,
basis?
this is
No.
just saying for us to go there for more information
Okay.
about this.
Yeah, Mary, one of the reasons why we're here today is because in 2018, we don't know whether the input that was garnered from the community is actually still where people are. So we're doing this to check in with people again to see where people are today. We're also always looking to engage with other people that didn't have a chance to participate in 2018. So that's important.
Was that Chainbreaker who did the outreach engagement in 2018?
No, that was actually led, well, Chainbreakers was involved, but in 2018 that was a
That was
city
the
project.
visioning process.
There's a visioning
For the
process.
roads, I recommend, so because we're on
Yeah.
Terraland, when you
Yeah.
decide to name these roads, I think you need to honor the fact that
That's
we are an indigenous
fantastic
Terraland and
idea.
should choose a name that represents like someone important in history who resisted
Yeah.
colonialism.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think what I want to sort of emphasize is that when we established a vision in 2018, the vision didn't get down to the brass tacks about what the physical plan was actually going to be like. We talked about ideas, concepts, land uses, what should be included, but there wasn't a how. We were in a process where that how was supposed to be determined by a master developer. And now we sort of need to change course, and the city needs to be able to.
Right, and there were 7 master plan developers that came forward with some great ideas.
They absolutely did.
They are being considered or not?
So yeah, that's where we are now. And our charge is to make this master plan so that the property can actually be meaningfully livable.
So
But the rezoning needs to
the
happen.
specific zonings that you would refer to would not have to happen. You can have a PUD that actually can allow for almost any damn thing you want. And so to try to think about where roads go and where this is going to be a college and where it's going to be, I mean, it's...
That's still a rezoning.
All of those lines that chop up that drawing over there, they're just a quilt. They're artwork, as far as I'm concerned. Those are not zoning lines that Matt O'Reilly just drew haphazardly around where he thought there would be developable lots.
Yeah.
They're artwork.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing could be a PUD, like we were a
Yeah,
PUD.
yeah.
The city has a correct
Yeah.
zoning in order to do all the kinds of things
Yeah,
that go on
yeah.
here
Yeah.
from the visioning. And it's a matter of just sitting down and
Right.
reading it to find it.
Right, and that's,
Finally.
so Mary, that's exactly what we're trying to do. So,
Can I just
Holly?
say one thing, because I haven't said much, but I really
Yeah.
support Sage's ideas.
Thank
Ditto.
you. No, I appreciate you coming to the table and joining us. Holly and Michael actually do have an online survey. So if you would like to actually document how this went this morning and sort of how you're feeling about the process, there's an opportunity to do that here. So I welcome you to sort of take one of these and you can fill out the survey. I think there's also an opportunity to input your contact information so that you can be sort of fully
Do you understand the QR code?
of actually what's happening.
Me either.
Yeah, we have a physical survey as well, and we're continuing the engagement process throughout this, so.
Okay.
Kim, thank you.
Continue to share your
Thanks for giving
ideas.
us time.
We're continuing the engagement process throughout this, so, please share your ideas about the
Oh, right, okay, just different, I think maybe the UNM focuses on.
Well, I appreciate
We can move around.
Did his plan for,
No, I understand, but, I think that.
sorry, I have a hard time remembering names of things.
He's so good at knocking on doors and.
Yeah, no, but his plan for, the kind of, I'll talk to him. He still has that plan. You might,
I've worked with them in the past, but.
yeah. Yes, I do.
Where did you learn about that project in Caracas?
I attended dance classes there. When I was a youth. I grew up there. And you?
Right.
I'm Peruvian. Oh, cool.
Right.
Yeah, I went to Venezuela when I was a baby with my mom, and I grew up in this remote village on the beach.
Because this property.
And so like 2 or 3 hours away is Caracas, the big city. And in Caracas, they made like this tuna. It was government funded because they had
Fuerte y tuna?
They have
Tuna Fuerte y Tuna Fuerte. They've got a UNESCO prize.
Yeah, the railroad spur.
Cultural park, Tuna and Fuerte.
Where
They got a prize.
Yes,
So they basically built it with,
and so
you see, this is very big containers.
And so there's.
Oh, yeah, like,
yeah.
And so
With recycled materials, it's very sustainable.
very much so. And there's spaces for photographers if you don't have money for like your dark room. The government plants it and it's there. So if you like dancing, there's a network of teachers that teach you dance. So there's some studios and they also founded a TV channel called
So there are no street trees down here because the state is
still operating. Yeah, even though they're like blocked and there's like an economic war. And like even though millions of Venezuelans are leaving.
No, it wasn't thought to have street trees.
But they do concerts there. You should send this article to yourself.
Yeah, I'm going to, I have the name on the bottom.
Yeah,
But I just wanted to,
so like in Santa Fe, there's so much talent, but there isn't really outlets. So these youth, they end up leaving town or they don't get to explore their talents. And so with the space like this, it just mobilizes the whole community and it creates this and then the youth
No, this is on city sewer. They've got
all the
their
high
own
schools can they're like send their students to the
So do you work with this connection about?
I live around up here, like 5 blocks.
and you go east.
But this
I ride my bike.
Oh, you do?
Here, and then right here, every third Saturday, there's an event. It's called the Community Art Process by Sean. He's an international known artist, but he conducts community events in town. And right now he runs the Community Art Process and he gives away free things for the youth to engage because they can't afford to go to the store or gallery. And he does other type of youth work. He created a Black History series, video. It's really good to have somebody like him in town. But there's been concerts.
And did you bring there? Like, what are they? Are they from America? Are they from somewhere else?
The people that attend that event are vendors who are artists who want to sell their stuff, and also donors who have a lot of money and donate art supplies, and then the families like us who go to pick up supplies for the children to make stuff. It's educational.
I think we're going to share all the next group. I don't know what's defined. What do you know? Because I can give
So is your concern that if it's next, this will be kind of
Sometimes they're going to sell it to somebody and then they put it to something fancy and then they'll figure it out. Like what happened with
We're really trying to
So what happened with Meow Wolf is right after they came in, the property prices all around went up.
That's great. We really appreciate it.
There were some other different things. There was some property bought turned into something else for tourists, not for tourists. Like our own community doesn't have access to it.
Mary, thank you for
even
coming.
do they have bars?
They have like one day a month where it's like better priced.
Yeah, that's good.
I still
But
there.
they're, okay.
So they went to Colorado and they bought it in a really poor neighborhood, bought land for it expensive and created a new meal. And the same thing happened all around.
If you would like to say,
Okay, thank you.
is this your one? Yeah, I'm going to take this one. This one is
I'm really here to interpret, but I don't know what kind of outreach was done to Spanish speakers too. I don't
The
think
Spanish speakers?
I don't think
No,
the
no
Spanish
sé.
speakers.
We can do it in Spanish. I can do this in English.
Is this used to okay. Anna, how would we get one of those to complete the survey, but wait until after,
Yeah, all the same.
until after this evening.
Okay.
And the next sessions will be the same as this one.
Okay. This is
You know, if you want to,
So we might have
same
to
question. But just trying to provide space for small.
And I just introduce myself. We're going to start with introduction. And then I just want to try to sort of orient you to what's already been done and what we're trying
Back
to
and
do next.
forth, you know.
In terms of just planning for the Midtown district.
Oh, I see.
This is all I
I'm on my own. You want to get started?
So the group I thought the first one was supposed to go till noon.
I think it was 9 to 10.
No, the paper said 9 to noon, 1 to 4, 5 to 6, 6 to 8.
I think the farm. This is second session.
10 o'clock. Yeah.
Sorry, I think there was 4, but that came out from the city.
9 to 10.
We're going till noon.
Okay.
And then from 1 to 4.
Yes.
Yeah.
2 more sessions this afternoon?
There's 3 this afternoon.
Yeah, so interesting, if you filled out the application and we asked you what time you were
Yeah, 3 this
available,
afternoon.
and then we kind of said, okay, please.
That's what that was. Okay.
Sorry.
This wasn't right.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Nat.
Hi, I'm Robert.
Hi, nice to meet you, Robert. I'm Stefan Pellegrini. We're going to get started with you. You're welcome to stay on it, and please don't feel like you need to leave, but we're just going to start making some things. Just wanted to let you know.
Step back.
So I'm going to get started, introduce myself, and then I'm going to try to sort of orient you to what we're trying to do right now. And then I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves and tell us how you are associated with Midtown, associated with Midtown, or if you're a neighbor or just an interested citizen of Santa Fe. I'm Stefan Pellegrini. I am a planner and an architect, and I'm principal with a company called Opticos, and we are assisting the city with this planning effort. Work on Midtown has been going on for a while, and in fact there was a visioning process in 2018, and maybe some of you had an opportunity to be a part of that. The city's engagement in 2018 established a vision for the property as sort of a mixed-use district that would sort of include opportunities for residential, retail, cultural and arts activities, amenities and services in support of the film industry, new parks and open space. And they sort of saw it as sort of a connected, vibrant district in this part of Santa Fe. And that information was actually organized around sort of 4 guiding principles, and this is something that we can all think about today, is how we can sort of make planning decisions that are respective of the environment, that respect equity, that respect economy and opportunity, and that are respectful of culture.
Can you repeat those 4?
Yeah, sure. Let's see if I can do this. This is a test. Environment, equity, economy, and culture. So one of the things that, as many of you may know, there was a process last year to choose a master developer for the site. That process actually selected a master developer, and the master developer then decided to pull out for several reasons. And the city is actually very interested in continuing the efforts that the master developer would have actually been doing, which was primarily to sort of rezone the property and make it available for future development and future investment. One of the key issues right now is that it's in the wrong zoning district, so we need to put a plan together to actually rezone the property, and that will allow the city to actually make decisions about subdividing the property and making it available to investors. It's not a blank slate. There's a lot of sort of really high amenity, highly valued buildings on the campus. There's also a lot of space that's underutilized that can sort of be transformed into new buildings, new neighborhoods, new streets, new parks and open space. All of that needs to be put together in a physical plan, which will actually provide the details and the direction for that rezone. So we are starting that process yesterday. This is something that we're sort of getting underway. We want to sort of be able to put this plan together in the coming months. This is a plan that will need to be reviewed and considered by the Planning Commission and the governing body. And we do this work through iterative feedback loops with the community. So our primary purpose today is to check in with all of you, have a conversation about these elements that need to support this sort of physical plan. Check in and see where we are on sort of the decisions that were made in 2018 and see how valid those are. See how sort of people feel about those. And then we anticipate actually having a lot of opportunities for engagement, particularly now. We'll be back again in September with some additional events. And then you'll start to see the plan and sort of the process go through public engagement until it is actually reviewed and adopted probably in the middle of next year by the Planning Commission and the governing body. So that's sort of a little bit sort of about the process that we're in. This is sort of a chance for us to start to think about, well, if we want the campus to be more connected, how do we do that? What are the ways that we actually can provide new opportunities for connectivity, new streets, new connections? If there's ways that we can sort of introduce housing or new neighborhoods to the campus, how do we do that? Where should it be? What should that be like? These are some of the questions that we sort of want to start to try to answer. So hopefully that gives everybody sort of a sense of where we are and sort of what we're doing. I'd like to go around the table and have everybody introduce themselves. And maybe we can start here and sort of go around in this direction.
Okay.
And please also tell us if you're affiliated with Midtown or sort of what your position
Okay.
is.
Good morning. My name is Anna Coughlin, and I was actually at the previous session, so I'm just sitting in, so I'm not going to speak much. We're here to listen. Moved here about 2 years ago, although I've had family here and been coming to Santa Fe since I was a teenager. And I teach actually with Michigan State University, but I teach online, so I can do it here in Santa Fe in the Department of Psychology. I don't know Midtown very well. I've driven through it. I've gone to some events in the past, but not much. But I go through it, and it just feels like it has great potential. And it's just a very important space, and I want to see it thrive and help us do that.
Thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Senya Rizzo. I'm a senior designer with Optical Design.
My name's Jeff Hendricks. I'm a private citizen here in Santa Fe. Lived here since 2004, but actually started working in Santa Fe remote from Denver back when commercially there wasn't much below St. Mike's as far as heading to the interstate. It was open prairie, if you will. So I've certainly seen that area develop. Recently retired, worked with a firm that was involved in physical communications, and also, so this is a significant interest to me creatively and how that's going to affect the community. I live in Soli Lomas, so not directly related, but certainly involved with Midtown periodically, and was involved in the initial development of Creative Santa Fe back in the 2000s.
Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Perry. I'm with Tool Design Group, and I'm a landscape architect. I'm with the design team with Opticos, and I have a specific focus on multimodal transportation and green infrastructure.
I'm Mary Scriven. I was at the first session as well. I live half a block south of the Santa Fe campus, and I'm here representing the Rancho Sereno Neighborhood Association and the League of Women Voters.
Thanks, Mary.
Hello, everyone. I'm Maria Sanchez Tucker, and I'm the Library Division Director for the Santa Fe Public Library. And I'm here to hear more about the project and what our community is interested in. It's very exciting. We also have a great community need with a new library in the Midtown area. So I'm just interested in participating. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Mary.
My name's Rebecca Phillips. I think we're neighbors, so we live in Solar Lomas also. I don't know if you can ask, you can come. And we've been in Santa Fe since '83, and I serve on the advisory board for the public library. So I'm here to listen and to advocate for something much beyond what college, both in terms of technology and services and community space and things like that, and just the belief that the library can be a draw.
My name is Jerry Wise. I'm here, Rebecca's my wife. I'm here as a social appendage. But I'm really interested in how this is going to play out, and the process, and the question I'd asked earlier, which I think deserves to repeat, is what is the process for this? What comes first? What comes next? And how this is going to be developed? And it seems it's a great opportunity, and we've seen a lot of great opportunities go awry.
My name is Sage Bird. I live in the neighborhood, and I would like to make sure that the city decides or considers investing in the youth that live in that neighborhood. Not for profit, but for, you know, they're gonna give back to the city if we do invest in them.
I'm Robert Ennis, a branding and communications designer, co-founder of an organization called Design Corps that is promoting and pushing the professionals in Santa Fe to become more active in social impact projects, and whatever we can do to create momentum or amplify the momentum that's already there in the arts and design and creativity community.
My name is Annette Possery. I'm also a member of Design Corps. I also sit on the Friends of Architecture Board of Santa Fe. My background is in brand communication design, but I am very much interested in design generally and understanding how design can shape our community. So, Stefan, I do have 2 requests. Can the rest of the people who are not part of the table also, I feel a little observed.
Oh, yeah.
Can I just know who they are as well?
Absolutely. That would be helpful for me too. So, please go ahead. Well, Drew.
Hi everyone, I'm Drew Finke. I'm working with Opticos Design as well as working with Stefan and Senya. I am preparing for this evening, so that's why I'm not at the table here. But we'll certainly hear your conversation.
And then Craig, why don't you still?
Craig Lamb, I'm working with Daniel Hernandez, the project manager for this.
I didn't hear you, but.
Craig Lamb, I'm working with Daniel Hernandez, who's the project manager.
Okay.
Hi everyone, my name is Leilani Padilla-Young. I'm a course certified interpreter, and I'm here to assist anyone who might show up and needs to hear all of these discussions in Spanish.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Hi everyone, I'm Noah Burke. I'm with the City of Santa Fe, and I am kind of observing because I want to hear what everybody's ideas are. I'm the planning manager for the land use department, and I am the land use contact for the Midtown team. So I've been working with this for a few years. It's good to see some of you, and also hear that some of you are my neighbors because I live in Soley Lomas also. So you guys might catch me in the morning running with my dog that's pulling me on a Tuesday or Thursday running through the neighborhood. So it's really great to see everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, and Eliana.
Hello, good morning. Eliana Reyes. I'm a project manager with Sherwood Design Engineers, and I'm here supporting the Opticos team with stormwater management, drainage, and some utility infrastructure.
Thank you. Okay, my second request, as a brand communication designer, because you guys called it the listening session,
Yeah.
I really did thought that we were going to listen to you guys.
Oh, interesting.
Right. I mean, okay.
Okay.
Fair enough. So I think if you're,
I can talk more.
If you're needing data and input,
Yeah.
I think you're going to need to do a lot more, for me at least.
Yeah.
Like when you say,
Yeah.
there's zoning problems here, like I don't even know what are the zoning issues.
Yeah.
What buildings are you trying to preserve and why? So like.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would be happy to sort of talk a little bit more about that, and I'm also happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability that sort of anybody might have. But what we sort of wanted to focus on was that the city in particular felt that a lot of people were ready to engage and ready to talk about Midtown, and so the listening sessions were organized for that purpose, to sort of provide the opportunity for the community to come and talk in venues that typically haven't been provided before. The idea is that we're in a venue where we have time for all of us to speak at the table and all of us to be heard in a one-on-one conversation, which is very different if we have a big public meeting and 3 people get to participate. So that was sort of the idea behind it, so I totally appreciate it. Just sort of the question about the existing building program is an important one, and the city has done a lot of work to try to understand the condition of the facilities, and they've started to set priorities with regards to what they want to keep, what might sort of be something that is worth keeping in the short to medium term, but ultimately might be sort of a redevelopment opportunity, and then things that probably are important to actually think about demolishing now. And I would say that the second and third pieces of that list are a little bit in flux, because if buildings actually have users who actually want to use the buildings and want to occupy them for some time. Maybe that means that, you know, if a decision was made that maybe this building will go in 5 years, maybe it will stay for 10. There's sort of opportunities to sort of think about that. What the map shows is that the buildings that are in light green are seen as the buildings that would be considered to be there permanently, and that there needs to be some reinvestment to rehab many of them to get up to occupancy. In some situations, there's issues with utilities and other things, but the sense is that those should be kept, and those include the Art Institute, the Garson Theater, and Fulkerson Library Complex, the Garson Studios, and Benildes Hall as well. The light blue buildings that you see on the map are buildings that likely are good for temporary use, but in the next 1 to 5 years, maybe they go into a category of becoming a redevelopment site. And those include many of the dormitories. They include the Driscoll Fitness Center, for example, and other properties. And again, some of those buildings are occupied today. Some of them, there actually are potential users that could go into them. So you can start to think about this almost like a phasing strategy that needs to emerge, where some buildings might be here in the short term, 5 or 10 years from now they might become an opportunity site for new development or new investment to occur. But the thing that I sort of want to point out is that beyond the permanence of the green buildings, there is some flexibility to kind of sort of think about this. The idea is to sort of include a strategy in the plan that can provide some direction for how buildings should be used, reused, or removed for new development in the time frame that happens. Does that help answer your question?
Start, yes.
Yeah. Okay, please go ahead.
Does the green buildings that some are given, you know, for retention?
That's a good way to put it. Yes. Yeah.
But is the assumption that they will serve the purpose they served prior to? Good question. Because just because a building is labeled a library doesn't make it a library.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good question. I would say that buildings like the library or the theater, that they are conducive to sort of maintaining a similar use because they don't need to be substantially renovated in order to sort of shift them over to something else. A building like Benildes actually has a much more flexible floor plan, and it actually might be easily adaptable into a variety of uses. But I think what the city sort of thinks about is that, you know, a building like the library or the theater, in the future, it would be good to serve that function because that's what the building was actually built for.
A building built to be a theater or a library or a studio even 20 years ago is not necessarily what you need for those purposes now.
Right.
In terms of technology and user and accessibility.
Some of these buildings are quite particular, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that actually is something, I think that's an issue that needs to be.
It just needs to be discussed and acknowledged, to start by acknowledging that I
very much agree. Yeah, go ahead.
Sustainability assessment as far as energy conservation. And I heard earlier to include sustainability socially, economically, and environmentally.
Yeah, there's 2 points there that you raised, I think, that are sort of good for everybody to think about. One is that the existing facilities are being assessed, and part of that assessment is how do they work in terms of energy? Are they energy efficient? Right, and that work is ongoing, and the decision to keep a building or remove it, that's definitely one of the factors.
Yeah, because you could save so much utility.
Yeah, and you know, you can look at that in terms of operating costs, but you can also look at that through the lens of is it sustainable? And those 2 things connect.
And renewable energy.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing that you mentioned just goes back to that environment principle that we talked about and how development can be organized in a way that's environmentally sustainable. And you know, we can think about that sort of as a policy goal. One opportunity here is to think about what's the physical outcome of that. what would a place look like that is supportive of walking and biking, is supportive of green infrastructure, and those sort of like a passive beneficial environment where it's comfortable to be in spaces and be outside, be in shade.
Recycling.
Exactly, and then sort of for the sort of functional aspects in terms of sustainability. So we can sort of start to sort of think about all those things. One of the things I think that we noted that if we go on the walking, if any of you go on the walking tours in 805, there is a lot of open space, but there's also a great deal of just sort of empty surface parking. And there's a lot of areas where there is not shade. You know, there are some areas where there's good tree coverage, but there's opportunities to think about greening both of the surface and of sort of the tree canopy to make a better environment. And that's something that can also be good.
And as far as sustainable planning, if there are going to be housing units there, it would be convenient to also create jobs right there and, you know, have, everything walking distance, people could reduce their ecological carbon footprint if they're just.
You can start to see how the different principles are related, right? You can make a decision in one that sort of has an impact on the others. So it sounds like everybody here knows the campus and are sort of familiar with it, and they have been on the campus, and I think that's sort of really good. We want to start sort of the conversation by thinking about what's really pulled you to the campus. What are sort of some of the positive things that it's really important to you are preserved through this process? And this goes back to sort of that question I asked about, well, we can take the green buildings as givens, but there's other elements, other pieces, other places that it would be important for us to sort of identify. And those actually might be buildings. They also might be spaces. Sometimes those spaces are related to memory and history and sort of how we sort of reference different things. Sometimes those spaces are related to how we use a space and activities that actually might happen there. So Sage, you and Mary both had an opportunity, I think, to contribute some really valuable things in the last session, but I would love to hear from the rest of you about, you know, what has really positively drawn you to this campus that you really sort of think is important to move forward? We can go around the room, or people can just.
I don't have an informed opinion at this time.
Okay. That works.
My relationship with the campus has been through the academic institutions, the College of Santa Fe and then the University of Art and Design. I think there's a vibrancy there of the students that it's a way of infusing Santa Fe with a life or a vibrancy that isn't really anywhere else except the other campuses, the community college or the smaller public school institutions. But I think I'm interested in seeing that kind of cultural infusion or continuity, what we can do to support that.
So maybe there's some particular energy here at the Art Institute that would come to mind for you. And
I'm trying to shed some of the personal, my life work there is the communication designer. Yeah, so I do have some biases there. But and interestingly enough, I think that as an institute is one that needs to open up. And they do try and open up to the community and to the public of Santa Fe a lot more. And so there's certainly that concern of how we can open up even just the physical walls of the campus. I've seen some of the proposals in that way, that in the walkability, the bikeability, and I think having the housing and having the jobs on site, all of that's kind of integral to that idea of promoting and amplifying as a whole as a cultural institution. It's a cultural vibrancy per se.
That's helpful, Robert. Thank you. Sage, do you want to add, even if you touch on what you said before,
Yeah, I have good memories attending, going to the movie theater with my children, because they're alternative films. It's great to support. And also the community art closet happens every third Saturday of the month at the old library. So you walk in and it's right there, and there's music and the community comes through. It's usually 11 to 3. And I'd love for that to continue to happen, or to have infrastructure built for that, events like that, and concerts.
To sustain those kinds of events.
Yeah, that's what, people getting together and sharing culture.
Yeah.
And for the youth around the neighborhood to have access to that space and have learning opportunities, which they should have.
Thank you. Jerry, Rebecca, any thoughts?
I really don't have much to add at this point. It's still, in my mind, pretty much a blank slate. I think to develop it sensitively and sensitive to the neighborhoods around it, I think is to make it accessible and acceptable will be interesting. I do like the idea of small businesses being given priority in the area in order to local small businesses. Yeah. But I'm just interested in both how you're going to pay for this, how you're going to finance this development, and whether that's going to influence what's going to be developed.
No, I appreciate that, Jerry, and there's an idea that we can park and talk about in a little bit with regards to space for small businesses that can sort of directly tie to how we want to think about sort of parcelizing the campus, and we can think about sort of right now it's all on one big parcel, but the idea is that in the future it could be many, many different parcels that could be made available to different people for purchase or for rent or for sale. And that small businesses in particular will look for parcels that are smaller, that can sort of be sort of ground floor opportunities. And that's a real, that's the kind of thing that is, there's a physical component of the plan that can actually respond to that desire.
I don't know enough about this, but it would seem to me that it might also be good for those parcels to be leased rather than purchased, so that the city maintains the ownership of the property as time goes by, and the leases can be quite long term.
So like similar to the Shoe Fly Street, that's.
I don't know that, so.
Yeah, that's the Barca Rail Yard District. That's correct, right?
Yeah, it's the South Rail Yard, as we call it, and the North Rail Yard is the downtown one.
So I'm going to hit pause for just a second because we have some new folks that have joined us that I want to make sure that we have a chance to introduce. And there actually are a couple of governing body members here as well, and I want to have a chance to introduce them to the group. And so, sir, can we start with you?
Yes.
Tell us who you are and if you are affiliated with Midtown.
Okay. Well, I'm Richard Martinez. I'm an architect. I'm here in my office is here in Santa Fe. I am also on the board of SFAI, which has their facilities on this campus. And so I've seen a lot of what the development is. I haven't been involved very much, so that's why I'm here, to listen. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Richard. I really appreciate that. Noah, did you want to introduce the governing body members to the group?
I just wanted to introduce this, or I'll let them introduce themselves. Two very special constituents.
Hi everybody, my name is Signe Lindell. I represent District 1, which we are sitting in right now. I'm not going to charge you a toll today. However, I have to give you a little disclaimer that I brought my hearing aids off to have them adjusted this morning. I'm having a very, very hard time hearing everyone. So when I return, I'll be able to be more interactive. But I think that you all deserve to be applauded, that you're putting your time into this and that you're showing up and that you care enough to do this. We're a big city. We have 84,000 people that live in this city, and we've got 20 people in this room. And I applaud you for caring enough to come down and do this. It's a big deal. We have some massive hurdles with this project. We've had a couple of toe stubs on those hurdles. I did hear a little bit of what one gentleman said about financing. I'm the consistent counselor that talks about financing, and that we can make a fabulous list. But if we can't finance it, we can't build it. And we know that this project is in need of massive amounts of money. And for that to not be part of the conversation is to not be very realistic about where we're going. It's not just a wish list. Let's make it a real list, something that we really can do, and not just, like the list that I make up when I dream about what new car I'm going to get. I'm never going to own that car. Not going to happen. So she's laughing at me. I'm just hoping to get the windshield replaced in the car I have now. So I beg of you in this process, which I respect deeply, I beg of you to try to stay realistic about what our resources are and what our assets are and where we really can go with this. Thank you for allowing me to introduce myself, and really a huge thank you to every one of you sitting at this table today.
Hi, my name is Jamie Cassett. I'm the City Councilor representing District 4, which is the district that Midtown does sit in. So this is a project that is extremely important to me, wakes me up at 2 a.m., something that I really do spend a lot of time thinking about. I think that Councilor Liddell, this is definitely a very challenging project. I guess I've also been the one who's kind of spoken on the other end of the spectrum. We do get along very well, by the way, of really thinking about, for me, and again, thanking you all for being here, of what the social investment is of Midtown. And I really do believe it's that balance. We, of course, have to be able to afford it, and we also have to think about what are the potential opportunities for Midtown campus. I frequently think about this as I have an almost 3-year-old, wow, getting old, who I really contemplate, what does this mean for him? What does this mean for his generation? What should we be building now for our future residents as well as for our residents now? So thank you all so much for being here. Again, very exciting project. God, we have a lot of work to do. So I cannot express my gratitude enough for being here and really thinking about this property that, again, really is a cornerstone in my district. So thank you for taking the time and energy to discuss and think about it in such a creative and productive, collaborative way.
I thank you so much for both of you being here also. I do want to just kind of follow up, Stefan, to what Sig is saying about the finance, because I think as a normal citizen, I have no idea, right? So I think, how do we understand different financial models? Because Sig, what you're saying to me is like, hey, make the list real, but I don't even know what anything costs and what the budget is, and are we allowed to allocate? I have no idea. So what is the process of us dreaming something and then having somebody, okay, you want this? This is line item, and then is it a matter of like choosing based on? I don't even understand the process, Stefan.
If I can try to sort of say this without, I will do my best. And we need to put this plan together, so I don't have an answer for you today. But one of the ways to think about it for me is that if we look at the campus as a whole, and we say it has all of these problems and issues in the aggregate, it needs all of these investments in order to make it this place that we want. That number might be very high and very scary for a lot of people.
Right.
If we say, if we're going to make 64 acres into mixed-use, thriving, vibrant district that has all of these different things that everybody wants, that might be very expensive. And that also might be very daunting to say it in that way. But, and so I don't think we will get very far if we sort of think about that as a strategy. The alternative is to say, this is a 64-acre project that needs to emerge over time. This is a long-term investment, not only for the city, but all the other people who actually might end up having a stake in this sort of moving forward. And maybe there is a way to think about a balance between the cost of infrastructure and improvements to the campus in smaller chunks and the development and the private development return that can actually be made as well in smaller chunks. And we haven't really been able to do that, to sort of think about a disposition strategy, a phasing strategy, a financing strategy that will all work together and can bring things down into reasonable chunks. And so a way that actually might work is that maybe you could think about a fifth or a sixth of the campus or a 4-acre parcel somewhere on the campus that could be subdivided. And maybe you can sort of say, in order to make this accessible to private investment, I'm going to need to build a new street stub, and I'm going to need to build a new bike lane, and I'm going to need to build something else, and that's going to cost X. But the cost of that investment is actually more equal or more in balance with the development return that can actually be made in that chunk, and that strategy can be different than saying, in order to make the whole 64 acres ready for development at the same time, I need to make a really big investment in order to sort of make that happen. So that strategy, we hope, can sort of emerge from this process. And the other thing that it actually can do is it can say, it can provide a roadmap for saying where the city or others need to invest, but also if there are gaps in the financing, where the city can actually look to actually fill those gaps through other means, through grants or other things that can be made possible to sort of fund those smaller chunks. But all that really needs to be laid out and needs to be sort of put into a framework that is viable and usable, but also flexible because things change, right? And so we sort of, on one hand, need to kind of make a predictable framework, but we also need to make sure that it's flexible and can adjust to sort of new things. So there, again, we don't have an answer yet, but if we were going to start today, that's what we would try to do, is to sort of make that strategy, make an incremental strategy. So what that means, of course, is that there, and I think what we sort of all agree is that there's some pieces of this that should remain public amenities. They should be sort of in perpetuity. But there are other parts of the campus, maybe they actually are subdivided and they're sold off and they are made available to developers. Maybe those are local developers. Maybe those are out-of-town developers. Maybe it's a mix. But we need to sort of figure out that strategy needs to be sort of an integral to sort of the efforts that are going to sort of come out of the next 6 to 9 months. We are incredibly lucky that Dina Belzer, Strategic Economics, who is the prime consultant on this project, she has the opportunity to do that kind of financial analysis. And there she is there coming to the table. And as we're making these planning decisions in the next few months, she has an opportunity to provide that analysis in real time, which is actually very different from the way that these processes work usually, which is you make a plan and then you give it to the economist and you say, hey, what can you do with this? We have a chance to actually do this in real time. So we very much want to sort of try to solve and address these issues, and that's the strategy for how we would actually try to assist. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yes. Can we have an introduction?
Of course.
Yes.
Yep, go ahead. I'm listening.
Who are you?
Oh, I'm Dina Belzer, and I'm with Strategic Economics. We're part of the consultant team that's working with the city. And the reason that I'm late coming into this meeting is because I've just been in a meeting with the city attorney, and somebody from the finance department who does all the city's bonding and so forth, Brad Filch. So we are very much thinking about what these strategies are to pay for the infrastructure and the improvements. And I think the point that Stefan made is that the city will not pay for all of the improvements to the 64 acres, right? There are some things the city will pay for. There are some things that others will pay for. There are a myriad of strategies for paying for this stuff. So it's not like the city's going to have to step up, and it will be done over time. So we are very much looking at this. So understanding what people are concerned about, what people's priorities are, what you're comfortable with, should not be about the money. It should really be about your vision, because we're really here to hear what you are concerned about, how you access the site, how you use the site, and then we really want to use all the tools at our disposal to support that and make that happen. And we really do, as Stefan said, it's a very unusual opportunity to be doing the financing strategy and the planning simultaneously, but that is what we're doing.
And that's how this differentiates what happened in 2015, because the rubber's hitting the road, and we're trying to figure out, okay, now we got to move beyond the vision and figure out how are we actually going to make this happen. And it's very important for all of you to be engaged in that conversation.
A question. I mean, I just read an article about a 10,000-year-old clock, a 10,000-year clock. What's the time frame?
I've seen that clock. It's an amazing clock. So do you have a sense of that, Dina?
About the time frame for the final...
For the implementation of
to start it and to
finish something.
And to finish something.
The time frame to start it is, as we're starting it now. I mean, we started in 2018, right? And we're kind of moving forward. These kinds of big reuse strategies take a lot of time.
Yes.
Right? And so I think it's important for people to understand that because the city's not going to pay for the whole thing, the private sector is going to be involved in paying for this as well. It's going to fit within the context of multiple real estate market cycles. COVID, it just set us back, right? So, it changes things. So we're going to, as Stefan said, we're going to need something that's going to be pivot and be flexible. It could take 10 years, could take 20 years. But we're also moving forward now with various actions that will fit within this larger framework.
But I think it's a good question. I mean, one of the reasons why we wanted people, I'm Daniel Hernandez, I've been working on the redevelopment project with this team and city staff for a couple of years now. But one of the things we knew going out the door was it's 64 acres and it doesn't happen overnight. But what's really important is to focus on what you know today, but be flexible for what could potentially happen in the future. So we know sites like this can last anywhere from 5, 7, 10, sometimes 12, but depending on market cycles and the future of Santa Fe, how it grows or doesn't grow. And those would kind of be the variables along the way. But right now, we want to set the stage for what we want to see there, and as well as what we don't want to see there. And that's why it's really important to engage in these conversations with everyone.
I have to go to
Okay, Christina, I do too.
So this has been sort of a different kind of listening session. We are at 10 o'clock. I don't see any new folks coming in, so if we want to continue the conversation, we absolutely can.
I think that's just to clarify for myself. Yeah. Just to clarify,
oh yes, sorry.
When will you actually think something is going to be built?
I mean, I would go to, it's hard to speculate, right? So I think what they're trying to say is that there's market cycles, right? So I think we probably have this whole vision in our head that as soon as everything gets approved, like the rezoning and maybe the master plan and decisions are made.
Or perhaps that's the question to ask, when do you think the rezoning will be done?
So that's a more accurate question for us to be able to answer, because we can't predict when people are going to build. And I think I'd let Stefan answer, because we do have a timeline that we'd like to try, but I think the rezoning process could take, what we're looking at here is with the rezoning and the master plan somewhere in the spring of next year.
Spring of 2022.
Yeah.
So, Daniel and I have sort of worked on a lot of these projects. I worked on a project that got entitled and rezoned in 2017. There was project that actually was approved and is under construction right now. At first, one building in that project. So 2017, so 2020, one building went under construction. There's another 100 acres of that project that they are doing the horizontal infrastructure for. They're doing the streets and all the horizontal. So the idea is that we'll see buildings there probably in a couple of years. But that's kind of the time frame that these things sort of happen in. You know, so we're going to be 5 or 6 years in before we sort of see much that's substantial.
How easy is it for the city to say that they decide to allocate 10% of the 64 acres to reinvest in the youth who live in the area? How easy would it be for them to go to grants.gov and apply for grants to fund the programs for that 10% of allotted space and buildings that is meant to invest back in the youth of the community?
I think that's definitely, it's definitely a sort of a viable strategy, but there would be programs that could be funded by future grant opportunities. I think what would probably be best for the city is to ensure that there sort of are perpetual sources of funding to support those programs.
Does the city have a SIMS number and a funds number to apply for grants?
I actually don't know. That's a great question, but that's something that we can actually raise. So, Rebecca, did you want to add anything?
I
sort of circle around the room.
Yeah, I go back to the earlier question, was what draws us to the space, the area. In the part, what draws you is what's there. And so we go to movies there, we go to plays there. So you know, the studios and the theater. And so I think that informs what we want to put there, because those will become additional magnets. And it's also, not all of us are exactly adjacent, but it feels near. It's a nearby space for a lot of people in the city. And so it's with the major thoroughfares, it's pretty easy to get there.
Right.
Which also matters.
So sort of sustaining that access,
right.
The easy access is important for all people.
Yeah.
Since you brought that up earlier too.
Yeah.
Folks from your neighborhood being able to get onto the campus is pretty important.
Yeah.
And also access as far as like educational opportunities, for example, because all the low-income housing apartment complex that surrounds the area, the hundreds of children who live there, they don't have access to go to a summer camp that costs $300 a week.
Mm-hmm.
So if the city commits to allocating a small portion into investing in educational opportunities or investing in infrastructure to support their social movements, like there's skateboarders, poets who don't have a computer, or artists who don't have art supplies, or dancers who don't have a dance studio. These are the youth of Santa Fe who, if we invest in, will definitely return, come and give tenfold back into the city. So when I said access, I didn't mean like a means to getting there.
Not always physical access.
Access as far as having the opportunity.
Yeah, that's fair. I appreciate that. Thank you for that. So, Daniel, did you want to?
I just wanted to let everyone know that the mayor's here, and you may want to say hi, but then I just thank everybody for talking and participating in a session like this. And this is Michael Pride, who is responsible for a lot of bringing you here, and so I want to make sure you know Michael Pride. She's the director of the Design and Assistance Program at Center at the UNM. She's been working closely with the city doing this. And I think everybody met training earlier, but so anyway, I don't want to interrupt the flow, but it's exciting to have them here as part of this whole generation.
The idea of leveraging what's around, I think is really like the educational facilities that are right adjacent, but also because if we're going to have a theater, that means there will be a dance studio. Taking advantage of things outside of 8 to 5 and on weekends.
So nighttime activities.
Joint use activities. And that's, when I talk about a 21st century library, for example, it is, the library already checks out hotspots and laptops. But we can do so much more
I would like to join this if I can.
Please.
All those things are very important, but as an architect, I am concerned with the physical access. The way that you get into the campus right now is not very nice. And it doesn't really tie into the city very well. It's like a fortress. It's hard to get in there. The campus I think, was set up so that there was a connection to Cerrillos Road. And one of the sort of overall architects,
the master developer,
yeah, one of the plans was to have an access from
between
Cerrillos Road
and
the campus. And so I think that's something to be thought about and considered.
Yeah, that's helpful, and we can probably touch on that, and that we had a good conversation about that in the last session, that the connectivity right now is really limited, and there's opportunities in several directions, but we sort of really need to figure out how to capitalize on those. There is this central connection between Cerrillos and sort of the main part of the campus that's potential. There's another one that could potentially come out here between SFAI and Cerrillos using an existing easement that's behind, right, the strip center.
Yeah.
So this one.
I was talking about that one.
Yeah,
I mean,
this is a new one.
Yeah, because I know that there's a circle at the corner of the campus, so that's important.
Yeah.
But it seems like because the way that the mall was set up in the campus
is oriented, right?
This connection is going to be very important.
That's important for you. Yeah.
Yes.
And I appreciate the way that you actually have articulated that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other things that I'm concerned with is it is important to recognize also that there are some historic buildings on the site. As an architect, I feel compelled to say that. But and then also that SFAI has put together a coalition of arts organizations that are interested in taking in occupying part of the campus, and that these are local organizations, and so that's as tenants, yes, the visual arts building, yes. Anyway, those are the three things I want to mention.
Thank you for that, Richard. Jeff, did you want to add anything?
Well, I think, coming into a process that's been going on for a relatively long time.
It's been on a treadmill,
Yeah, and appreciating the fact that since we began, and it was initially thought that there was a developer and it was going to move forward, it seems from the outside perhaps that it's 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. And not that that's intended, but there's things you learn along the way. And I wonder if first of all, I start sort of from the objective or the mission statement, if you will, of projects, and wondering if, based on what's been learned, if the key objectives of this project have changed at all. From where they were 5 years ago, let's say. Because the strategies that are being developed and the opinions, the valid opinions of those of us, whether it be professional or simply of the citizenry, are wonderful as it relates. And ultimately, is it viable? Is it something that's going to be affordable, be able to be financed and so forth? So I would like to understand a little better, and maybe there's something that's written or that we could look at as well, because I think for those of us, I'd like to make sure that my opinions are respectfully take into consideration the work that's been done and what's been learned. The best example, perhaps, is that the infrastructure of many of the buildings were determined by the past company that was going to develop it to be, they're worthless. I mean, to be honest, right? That's a big change, obviously, from the vision and where things were in 2018, if you will. And so, it's about being, the point was made earlier, it's about being realistic with, not that the wants and desires aren't valid.
I appreciate that, Jeff, and I think that the best way to sort of think about this is that the general direction of the Midtown District Planning Guidelines right, that were adopted by the governing body in 2018, those still hold validity. There is great direction there. There were, you could say that there were responses to those guidelines that were embedded in the master developer applications. But because of the way that process happened and COVID and all these other crazy things, there was never really a public conversation about those responses, right? About sort of how that actually should be done. And then I think the other thing is that there's details that occurred in 2018 that are really have to do with this idea of how you put a physical plan together that can actually occupy these spaces, right? The status of these buildings may change moving forward. The light blue buildings that you see are buildings that have been seen to be considered actually appropriate for sort of temporary uses, particularly in the next 1 to 5 years. But after that, maybe they actually become future opportunities for redevelopment. Maybe they become opportunities for demolition and new construction. But that is also really depending upon if there are great users using those spaces with good long-term leases, the buildings are in good shape and maintainable, then right, the life of some of those buildings will change. So that's also a little bit in flux. And then the yellow buildings, which included alumni, those were seen also as appropriate for short-term use, but probably on a quicker path to sort of demolition or redevelopment, based on the amount of investment that we know needs to go into those buildings to bring them up to speed. And then there's some buildings, I think, that we're all, everyone's in agreement now, like, we can't invest in them to bring them up to speed, and so it's better to actually demolish them. So this sort of list is something that is going to continue to kind of evolve in the next few months, but it really starts to suggest a starting point for a phasing strategy, because it sort of also starts to suggest where land can be made available over what time frame for parcelization and new development. So I didn't mention that before, but that's sort of an important thing that we're sort of trying to think about and consider here. So you guys sort of all touched on this a little bit in terms of what some of the good things are, sort of what's working. Richard, you sort of talked a little about sort of how the connectivity is like a real issue that we sort of need to sort of overcome, but I would like to sort of understand like what other sort of negative things are there that you feel kind of need to be overcome in this process. Dave, you mentioned some of the needs, and we sort of really appreciate that. We could talk more about connectivity because that's not something that's just oriented to one side. It's sort of a four sides issue. But there could be sort of other things that you want to talk about and prioritize in terms of what are the real needs here and what needs to be overcome, and how the campus today is actually might be sort of even negatively impacting you or sort of the neighborhoods around it.
I have a couple of thoughts.
Thank you.
One of the things is that the way that you enter the campus right now is not only difficult, but it doesn't at all celebrate the space. And I think that is going to be important for me, for the community. It's going to be important that you feel invited into this campus, wherever you come from, wherever in the city you're coming from. And so that's going to be important, I think. And so how that connectivity, if there's just a left, like a simple left-hand turn from St. Michael's, right, or something like that, like how you come into the space.
Sort of the gateway.
Yes, and then also it should be something. I mean, all of these community ideas aside, I'm just talking about the physical.
No, I appreciate that.
It should be something that all of Santa Fe is proud of, and I think part of that is sort of a cutting edge sort of campus, so that celebrates sustainability and maybe solar panel issues or solar issues, and not be a gas necessarily sinkhole or something like that. There's forward thinking that everyone can get excited about. That's all. That's all. I think that what you were talking about with the buildings, the buildings that are going to be kept, I think that's really exciting because I think, in general, seeing some of that history of Santa Fe is going to be important. If there's going to be new buildings, a sprinkling of something of the old Santa Fe is going to be really important to see.
I can build one.
Yeah, no, please do, Ken.
You know, my professional life makes me, every place in the world except New Mexico, unfortunately. And when I saw the previous, I forgot how many years ago, presentations by all of the architecture groups, I nearly threw up. Because essentially,
I did.
Okay. No mask back then.
Little guy. Pretty bad.
Because essentially, it was making the site look like every single city.
Right, and it's
It looked like
horrible.
Boston, it looked like San Francisco, it looked like Oakland, it looked like LA.
Seattle.
It looks like Seattle, it looks like Portland. And it's like, this is Santa Fe, guys. So I think the needle that you just read through is, you know, how do you bring the new in, but keep it Santa Fe, guys.
Edible gardens.
No, I'm talking about the look and the feel.
Yeah, Mary, will you try to answer his question?
I'm sorry?
Will you try to answer his question?
Well,
That's
it's
a
not
great-
it's just a statement.
No, I have another question, but go ahead.
Okay,
you know-
because I would like to get.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to build on what you said, Richard, you know, it has to be something, but it has to be proud to be Santa Fe. You know, we're not trying to build in Austin.
Yeah.
We're trying to build Seattle or San
So
But
let's talk
all
about
of
what
Santa
that
Fe,
means.
because we have a black population, indigenous, Hispanic, like Spaniard and Hispanic Mexican descent,
Yeah.
and Hispanic, both of those things.
But yeah, you know, to walk
Diversity.
into a place that looks like every place else on the planet.
Awesome.
is-
We have that all around. We don't need any more. I think.
Anyway, but I just want to build on your thing about, if we're going to build community, you want to
Yeah.
build into a place
Well, I mean,
that people
Richard,
want to go to.
from an, I don't know, from an architect standpoint, what would you say to answer Ken's question about how would you make this place?
I don't think I need an answer.
Yeah, that's right.
No,
Because
yeah, no, I don't think
I don't
you do.
actually know how that would be accomplished. It shouldn't be as simple as the historic rules and things that are established in Santa Fe, because those sort of things don't actually promote the historicity.
You mean sort of Adobe?
Yeah, the brown and round, right? It
yeah.
shouldn't just be brown and round. That's not the answer. But I think that mixture of the historic buildings with the new buildings is part of that answer, right? Because if it all looks like it's new, it's not going to be, no one's going to like it. It's not going to be.
Something that Mary said in an earlier session was about, was it a museum or it was something about the Manhattan Project? That was right there on
The
the side.
Manhattan Project, I'm not saying go back to the Manhattan
No,
Project.
but I'm
Please,
saying,
don't
well, that's
mistake me.
whether, for whatever reason, I mean, that is a very important piece of Santa Fe
Yeah,
history.
it is,
And that's
because-
something that's unique to that spot, not to glorify it, but as a
Right.
historic.
But to,
But that's
but
something
to
that
at
we
least
need.
recognize it. And I think that Santa Fe Art Institute has done a good start on that. Their projects over the last couple of years, their listening sessions, their art displays, the Tula Rosa Downwinders project, all of that stuff was a good start. But this city does not recognize that there was this huge facility here. They think there was only the post office on Palace Avenue. There was this huge facility.
So what was-
Yelka Street was the way to get to the airport. There was an airport.
What was there before that? How do we
Yeah,
know it's not
before
like
that,
a-
it was Tila land and they raised their sheep on it.
So there might be like, it might be a burial site for indigenous.
It might
I
be.
don't think
It-
so.
yeah.
I don't think so.
It could be though.
But it's
No, I've talked to
the
people
Americas.
about that, and there doesn't seem to be any of that. There are two historic ranches adjacent to it from the 1800s. And, you know, there is history here.
Yeah,
It's important to acknowledge like
Yeah,
what is
so it needs to be
indigenous
acknowledged, right.
before the military.
And SFAI has actually been very good about
They've
that.
been great.
They may have research on what that historic
Right.
SFAI, Santa Fe Art Institute, which I'm on the board of, and it's in the corner of the
The
campus.
corner.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, the barracks, I believe, are from the
Manhattan
Japanese
Project.
internment camp.
Oh.
I
No,
think so.
no, they're from Vistas Barracks all along here. I have a photograph that shows
Yeah.
it. This was barracks and adjutant quarters here. All of the, everybody below that slept in tents all the way to Carlos Rey, Community Carlos Rey. And they're in the photographs, and there were bigger tents and smaller tents. But the historic ranch is right across the street. It's been there since the 1830s. And, you know, I mean, it's important to know that that was one, and the Andermans property south of the high school, they've been there since the 1600s. They were part of an original land grant.
I think it's important to
from the
plan
Spanish.
for the future problems we might face, like there's climate change, so I heard earlier they said plant trees to create shade and whatnot. But you have to plan looking, what will it look like 5 or 10 years from now? What will this community need in the future, and get ahead.
So I'm hearing a couple things here. I just want to try to spit them back out to you. So we talked a little bit sort of about built form character, and that it sort of needs to be, people need to understand that it sort of is Santa Fe, but you're not looking for an historicist response where you would just assume that everything that's there is going to be the...
I think that's ultimately unsatisfying.
Yeah,
to the
so
community.
that's helpful. So I heard that. The other thing that I've heard is that there's sort of the built form, but there's also how people use, how Santa Feans use space, and that has to do with outdoor spaces that are sort of public. It also has something to do with places like courtyards and sort of semi-public spaces. It also has something to do with open spaces and gardens, and sort of how you interact with those as a member of the public, sort of those things. And then Mary, what I heard you say is there's this history that needs to be acknowledged that's actually really deep. It sort of goes through sort of many different people and many different aspects. A lot of that is not really known or communicated right now.
Right.
And so there's some opportunities to bring that out into the open. And so that could be, I mean, you mentioned like street names is one idea about how you could sort of honor people, but do you think about like historical interpretation, like wayfinding, or like?
I see that any space in any community that gets developed and people they move there for a reason. They have needs that need to be met. They meet them. And that whether it was originally vacant land, then it became settled Tiwa land, agricultural uses, then it was this, then it was that. All of that just says to us, this is where we're at now, and it's going to be something later. And just fit all of that into the context and fit this development into the context. The whole idea that we had back in 2000 or 19, that it would be one plopped down huge development and that would be static for 20 or 50 years until it crumbled. That's not what this community is all about. This community has been evolving for thousands of years, and we should just recognize that. This is what we're doing here, now, and it's going to be something else later. The street that I'm on, it's going to be something else later. You know, where anybody lives is going to continue to evolve and fit this development or fit this expression of what we're building into something, a larger type of movement. We have new needs now. The whole world has new needs now after this pandemic. Everybody's thinking about it. And, you know, we should see that as an opportunity.
It would be neat to see how,
Thank you.
It would be neat to see how we could also allow space or something cool within the property for the tourists, but at the same time not just investing in the tourist comfort, but in the people around the neighborhood. But if like art tour, there's lots of local artists in town, and if there's a gallery show or
a wall for the graffiti artist, then it could drive folks to come and check it out.
Thank you, Sage. Thank you.
So I think the implications of part of what I took away from what Mary's statement was that it would be a mistake to completely build out the property.
Yeah, a horrible mistake.
You know, because you don't know what the future's going to be.
Right. So,
So
sort
there
of
has to be some
this sort of
amount.
phased incremental approach is important.
It's not even that. It's not even that direct.
Yeah.
It's like I'm gonna make the thing we're gonna build out 2/3 of the property, and the other third we're just gonna leave because we don't know what tomorrow brings. As opposed to a rush of subdividing it all.
To save something
Yeah.
for future.
Yeah.
It would be a mistake to let developers come in and do whatever they want and gentrify the whole area and not invest in the neighborhood.
No, that's helpful. I really appreciate you guys' responses to this. Mary, you already asked you this question, but I mean.
Oh, I just have a question to put on the, maybe your list someplace. I've been asking for years where the water is on this, and I'd like to know the location of every well and its productive capacity. And we also need to know where are the septic systems which are connected to sewers and which lines they go on. Because our neighborhood, we've been through the last 2 years an extensive tear up the streets and put in new sewer and water lines because we did not have adequate capacity. If you put some even medium-sized development on here in the next 10 years, we have zero capacity. And so that for the infrastructure problem was our biggest question in the neighborhoods, because we know that we're going to bear the brunt of whatever happens here for however long it is.
No, that makes sense.
And that's a big issue for us.
And that's something I didn't mention either, is that one of the things that needs to come out.
And I've never gotten a straight answer
Yeah.
from anybody
Yeah.
about where the wells are, whether they're done, capped off, where the septic systems are, all of that stuff from anybody. And we need to know that. We need to know this
I appreciate
downgrade
that.
from
So,
there.
Mary, so right now, what we're trying to do, and that we believe that we will have that information to be able to share with you, which is the information with regards to what's existing on the property right now. In terms of infrastructure.
And what works, because I bet there's some that doesn't work, and it's still
So-
sitting under there.
So that information is emerging, and then the plan is going to have a target development program. It's going to say, you know, in 30 years, we're ultimately going to try to build out this, and it's going to need to have an infrastructure plan that can actually support that amount of development.
Right.
And so that means that it will need to actually indicate we need new sewer here, and we need new water lines
Wait,
here.
hey, let me understand.
Yeah.
Are you saying that the water's gonna come from the site and the sewer's gonna be left on the site, not tied into the city system?
It is now.
It isn't. No.
I don't think it is, and we
And
don't
is it-
know which buildings
The
are.
plans are the plans to have this as an independent?
No,
Okay.
no,
Okay.
that's the problem.
So Mary, and so in this, you know, I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but what I can tell you, what we know, and I know that you have to trust me because I'm showing you nothing right now, but what we know is that the sewer system is connected to the city's sewer system. However, some of the buildings are on very long laterals.
Yeah,
Very long laterals, and those laterals are not in good shape.
they're not.
So, but the
Exactly.
major trunk line system is connected to the
Right.
city system, and it is properly functioning. The laterals that are going from that trunk system to some of the individual buildings, they probably need to be improved.
They're
If,
yeah.
if you add new development, you can no longer rely just on that system of laterals.
Absolutely.
So that's what I'm getting at in terms of sort of,
Right,
there needs to be an improvement plan that can
Right.
actually describe the quantity and the location of where that infrastructure will go.
Right.
And you can think about this too, is that right now there is a building every 300 feet. But if, for example, if you introduced townhouses to the site, you would need to be able to service very small properties very frequently, and this system of singular long laterals doesn't work well.
No,
So-
it's not gonna work.
So there needs to be some investment in the infrastructure.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
just really
That-
haven't
that
ever,
can occur.
we haven't ever been able to find that out, because we know
Yes.
that on our line, we're maxed out.
I totally understand.
And
Yeah.
this neighborhood here to the west is maxed out.
Yeah.
And if they think that they're gonna put in a new trunk line, we wanna know whether it's coming through our neighborhood.
Sure, absolutely, and all of that information will be part of
Yeah.
what can be
So
published.
I just wanna make sure it's on the table.
No, thank you. Margaret.
I have one more question.
No, go ahead, please.
Has there been any thoughts about access to the property from the north or the west?
Yes, and thank you for bringing that up. We
Yes.
talked about that a little bit this morning, that there's a lot of publicly owned property on the west side of the campus that could be reorganized to improve access to Franklin Miles Park, but also just to sort of that site in general.
Right, there's this street here.
Yeah, we talked about this additional
Here.
easement that's running here on the, behind the strip mall. We also talked about the opportunity to get across the,
From here to Milano.
the village shopping
On the
center
backside.
to actually connect over to
I
Milano.
live here.
A walking path of sorts?
Yeah,
or-
yeah.
It could be a walking path, yeah. Yeah. So those are all things that we are gonna try to explore a little bit more.
And
and
better,
identify.
better alumni drive, Yucca connection.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
Because this culvert will not take
So
traffic.
we're almost at time, so I want to sort of be respectful of everybody, and I want to make sure that I talk to you about the land acknowledgement meeting before you leave. I have,
Can I have one more comment?
yes, absolutely.
So last presidential election, some candidates ran with promising reparations and whatnot, and universal basic income. I think the city should consider allocating a percentage of the 64 acres to do something like that, like land back movement. And also there's a nonprofit in town called Black Health New Mexico, and they're looking for land. And I think you should consider reparations and the land back movement. It's very controversial, but if you do a little bit of research, I think, I mean, it's fair.
No, I think, yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
And that could speak to the thing that's unique to Santa Fe.
Yeah, I mentioned that there's an alliance of local arts organizations that SFAI has put together to occupy the Visual Arts Center. I think that should be, and I know the city has said that this is something that they're considering, but it's way far in the future. But it's something that should be looked at closely because it gives the community some sort of foothold in this, on this campus right now, soon or so. Okay?
Thanks for that, Richard.
Yes.
So just a couple of quick things. I'm going to put together a survey that you can respond to, so you can see some of these. And that will allow you to sort of provide some feedback, but also get you into the system so that you can be alerted to future events. We are doing a walking tour on the campus at 5 o'clock tonight, and that's going to be
5 or 5 to 6.
starts, yeah,
right.
from 5 to 6, and that's going to be followed by a presentation and sort of a community activity that we'll do together. If you can
And
come,
which building will we be in for that?
we're going to be at the Driscoll Fitness Center, which, yep, bingo, right there.
The orange one?
It's
No.
the big blue one.
The big blue one, okay,
Next
cool.
to the, yeah, so we'll start the walking tour from there, and then we'll be inside that
Okay,
space for the
okay,
meeting.
cool.
So I hope all of you have a chance to come and bring a friend. You're welcome, and it should be, my plan is that we're going to have fun. So,
And
all right?
this is really easy to use. You just open your camera and you point at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michael said if you're going to tonight's event, to complete the survey after.
I don't have the ability to do that. Sorry.
That's fine.
We'll just be there.
Yeah.
But if anybody needs, I mean, the QR code is for an online survey. If you would prefer or you need a paper version, we have that.
Of what?
A paper version of the survey.
I don't have any of that, so I'll just show up.
Well, okay. You are coming this evening, right?
Yes.
Can I give you a paper version of the survey so you can complete that afterwards?
To do what?
Complete the event evaluation survey.
Do you have it on paper?
Yes.
Okay.
Really nice to meet
You
you.
can do
Yeah.
it later. You can do it after the event that we have them before.
I'll bring it tonight.
Yeah, at the end of the day.
Okay, yeah, okay.